Chapter 5 Allies at First Sight. The Marathon lumbered through space, smoke billowing from her impulse engines. Following behind her, another coalition warship, the Cairo, struggled to keep pace. Utility shuttles and starfighters flew back and forth between the two ships. Meanwhile, Ino was trying to establish her new command. "We'll be at the Allied warship in about 4 hours," said Ensign Johnson, who had replaced Prisbin. Prisbin himself reported to the infirmary. "Someone from the hangar bay just called, and they said Air Boss Al-Haned collapsed a few minutes ago. They're taking him to the infirmary." "Shit," Ino cursed. "Find out who his second-in-command was, and bring them up to speed on the situation with our allies." "Captain, message from the Cairo," Ensign Johnson interrupted. "They say their antimatter reactor is going into an uncontained failure. They'll be dead in the water in about an hour. Their commander is giving the order to abandon ship." Ino felt her stomach lurch. Without the Cairo, Marathon would be completely deprived of escorts. She ordered the Marathon to halt its journey and launch shuttlecraft. The surviving crew of the Cairo was taking no chances. 400 men and women had donned spacesuits and were waiting for rescue in the airlocks and docking bays. It took just 20 minutes for the Cairo to be evacuated. Cairo's commanding officer, a colony-born woman named Osana De Sisto, quickly reported to the CIC. "You're the CO here?" Cairo's commander spoke with an Italian accent. Ino nodded and stood up to introduce herself. "Myself and my crew are at your command," Commander De Sisto said. "But first, my ship. I ordered my crew to sterilize it, to destroy anything sensitive or secret that might be on board. But we can't afford to take risks. You've got to scuttle the Cairo, right now." Ino nodded. "Johnson, call up the fire control tower and target lock the Cairo. Fire antimatter missiles on my mark." Ino waited until the last of the Cairo's crew was safely aboard Marathon. Then she ordered the destruction of her last remaining escort ship. 2 anti-ship missiles launched from the Marathon, each tipped with an antimatter warhead. The cruiser was torn asunder, leaving only a cloud of pulverized metal fragments and shredded wire. "That Allied ship is still putting out a distress signal," Ino said. "Helm, move us toward the Adimash at best possible speed. Signal them that we intend to dock." As Marathon approached the stricken alien warship, the Adimash transmitted a reply. Lieutenant Petros took the call. "They're mounting an adapter on their dorsal docking port," Petros said. "The augments also said they're clearing rubble out of the launch base for our shuttles." The Marathon descended from above and docked to the stricken cruiser. Unlike the now destroyed Cairo, Adimash was built for a different mission profile and would not have done well as an escort vessel. Armed to the teeth and outfitted with additional storage space along the innermost layers of her armor, Adimash could be best described as a pocket battleship. She was a strange, in-between design that melded the speed, endurance, and low profile of cruisers with the overwhelming firepower of a much larger battleship. Scanning now. They've got fires across most of their lower decks, and 2 decks are venting to space. Their impulse thrusters are disabled, but their hyperdrive is online. "They're in just as bad a shape as we are," Ino commented. "Send over damage control and firefighting teams. Anything else I should know?" Petros nodded. "The Allied captain wants to meet you." 15 minutes later, Ino reached the dorsal docking port. A group of officers and crew she gathered along the way was following her. Rafael Zapata, the new chief medical officer, marched at the head of a team of medics. Sota Beninato had pulled several members of the engineering team to help with damage control, including a junior lieutenant named Isozaki Kazuki, who Sota claimed was talented. Finally, an American petty officer named Miracle Hamilton rounded off the group. She had stepped into the role of boatswain without asking for permission to do so, but her knowledge of starship armor and shielding convinced Ino she was qualified for the job. The Savanti people require a slightly higher concentration of oxygen in the air than us to survive, Boatswain Hamilton told the group. The airlock needs a second to adjust our atmosphere. Ino took in a deep breath as the atmosphere cycled. Then the opposing door opened, and she stepped onto the Adimash. 5 Savanti crew were waiting to greet her. Like humans, the Savanti are bipedal mammals and mostly humanoid in appearance. Their skin colors varied across the bluish side of the spectrum, from indigo to ultramarine and all the way to periwinkle, teal, and azure. All Savanti were cyborgs. Ino could see advanced technological devices implanted in the arms, faces, and necks of each person. A few had eye implants reminiscent of the ones Sota used. Ino noticed that all of their cybernetic implants were decorated with what appeared to be religious symbols. "We're here to help," Ino spoke to the Savanti crew in clear English. "I am acting Captain Esperanta. This is Lieutenant Beninato, our chief engineer. He'll direct our damage control teams. Where's your captain?" While Sota and his crew started helping the Savanti save their ship, Ino was escorted up to the bridge. Zapata and his medical crew followed for a few decks before they found the sick bay, which was overwhelmed with injured crew. Boatswain Hamilton followed Ino and her escorts to the bridge. "This is Captain Ryland Quinn," a Savanti officer explained. "We were part of a fleet that got ambushed by the same enemy that attacked you. The hyper-relay leading into this system was a trap." "Hopefully we can help each other get out of this catastrophe," Ino remarked. The Allied officer stood aside and allowed Ino onto the bridge. She spotted a Savanti man who was clearly in command, speaking to a pair of junior officers before sending them on their way. Then Captain Quinn turned to look at Ino. She noticed at once that Ryland Quinn had piercing blue eyes, a chiseled face, and sharp-looking cheekbones. He was also taller than Ino by at least a foot, had deep sapphire blue skin, and was extremely handsome. Ino felt a powerful lurch in her stomach that had nothing to do with nerves. Ino's loss of focus was so sudden and so profound that she failed to notice that Captain Ryland was having the exact same reaction to the sight of Ino. Petty Officer Hamilton gave the smallest of eye rolls, cleared her throat to get the attention of both commanders. "Captain Quinn, this is Acting Captain Esperanta of the Marathon," Hamilton said. Ino blinked and forced herself back to reality. Captain Quinn stepped forward and shook Ino's hand. "A pleasure," he said in fair English. "The people who liberated our homeworld are always welcome here." "Thank you, Captain Quinn. I think you got caught in this trap before we did. Is there anything more you can tell us?" Ino said. Captain Quinn gestured to a nearby hologram projector. "A map of the region, please," he ordered. One of the bridge crew obliged, and a 3-dimensional map of the Weeping Ghost Nebula appeared in the air between Ino and Ryland. After a year and a half of war, Ino knew this region of space very well. The Weeping Ghost Nebula was all that remained of a now-defunct stellar nursery, where hundreds of stars had formed in a cluster. Now the territory belonged to the Savanti administration. A green marker appeared on the edge of the nebula, marking the location of Savasia, the Savanti homeworld and capital. A blue marker showed the location of Adimash in the neighboring system. "We are on a mission to deliver a valuable passenger to the home world," Captain Quinn explained. "However, after our fleets were caught in this ambush, we were struck by a supernova shockwave and were disabled." "The same thing happened to us," Ino told him. "My team tells me there's a radiation storm coming our way now, from the same direction as the shockwave." Ryland turned to speak to one of his subordinates. "A space storm? Didn't you say this was just an increase in background radiation?" "Yes, sir," replied a junior officer, but a radioactive storm could be preceded by a spike in background radiation, particularly if it's part of a shockwave. Captain Quinn and Ino both looked back at the hologram, where a new symbol had been added, representing the oncoming space storm. "We must make preparations," Captain Quinn said. "Esperanta, I mentioned my mission. It is of the most extreme importance to guarantee the safety of my passenger. If we are hit by a radiation storm, she will not survive. Our shields are inoperative." "I'll have my damage control team start work on your shields right away," Ino said. "And if we can't get your shields online before then, I'll take your passenger onto the marathon." Rylan nodded. "In that case, I think you should meet her. Follow me." Captain Quinn guided Ino down 3 decks. As they moved, Ino sent Boatswain Hamilton to deliver a message to Sota and the Marathon engineers. Ino was shown into the last place she expected to find aboard a military vessel, a scientific laboratory. 2 rooms had been given over to what appeared to be a hydroponics bay. A wide assortment of plant life was growing from terraces and racks on the walls, while a complex hydration system delivered water and nutrients via plastic tubes. There were 2 people inside the hydroponics facility, an android and a plantoid life form. The plantoid was visibly female, tall and slender, with bright green eyes and vibrant blooming flowers on her shoulders. The plantoid scientist was so engrossed in her work that she completely ignored Ino and Rylan. The android, however, slipped out of its chair and approached. Ino was taken aback. "You're a Boston Dynamics android, aren't you?" she said. "You're far from home." The android's synthetic skin was slightly reflective under the bright lights, but the glow of his yellow eyes stood out even to Ino. "I am here with good reason. I am a guest of Astro Creator Azarin," the android said, gesturing to the plantoid woman. Captain Quinn introduced Ino to the android and then raised his voice a little to make sure the plantoid called Azarin had also heard Ino's name. As the android lifted its arm, Ino spotted a familiar symbol tattooed onto its faux skin. She instinctively reacted to it, placing her hand over her heart and saying, "Solidarity and sapience, friend." The android did a double take. So did Captain Quinn. The plantoid, called Azarin, also looked up. Ino noticed that the android was now giving her a subtle smile. "I'm sorry, what?" Rylan asked. "It's a motto," Ino replied, pointing at the symbol on the android's arm. "Before the war, I was part of a political movement that championed free rights for AI and synthetic life forms like this individual here." Rylan was looking thoughtful. The android shook Ino's hand. "I am BD Gen 9. I am a delegate of the synthetic community of Earth, and I am authorized to speak on their behalf," the android said. "You may call me Delegate, as the others do." "You humans continue to surprise me," Rylan said. "I was warned that your people were stuck in the past when it comes to synth rights. But I suppose some of you are further ahead than others." "Some of us," Ino agreed. "Delegate, Azarin, there's a dangerous radioactive storm coming our way. If the situation gets bad, I'll give you shelter on my vessel. We have wide-spectrum energy shielding." The plantoid, called Azarin, finally stepped away from her work and regarded Ino. Ino shuddered. She felt like she was being analyzed. After a moment, Azarin tilted her head to one side and said in a lofty, dreamy sort of voice, "How do you value life, Commander Esperanta?" Ino was taken aback. She was not used to being asked philosophical questions by way of greeting. A brief flash of memory shot through Ino's mind. Her days in officer school came back to her, particularly a class about how to handle social interactions with non-human people. Cultural and societal norms are not the same from one species to another, the instructor had said, In an ideal scenario, you should conduct research ahead of interactions and know how to respect alien norms before conversing with them. But, in an unplanned contact, I suggest this simple rule. When in doubt, humor them. So long as it's reasonable to do so, of course. Ino gulped and looked into Azarin's vivid green eyes. Now she was confident. Azarin was trying to figure Ino out, to get a sense of her mindset. Ino put her hands on her hips and thought over the question one more time. How do you value life? Is this a trick question? Ino said to Azarin. Delegate and Rylan both dropped their jaws. Whatever response they were expecting from Ino, it was not that. To their surprise, Azarin let out a long sigh, and a contented look appeared on her face. At last, a soldier with more than conquest and death on her mind, Azarin said. I share your sentiment. All life holds infinite potential. Azarin gestured to the hydroponics lab around her. Commander Esperanta, I am an astrobiologist. I am studying a new terraforming method I call astrocreation. My research is more important than my life. If, as you say, this radiation storm threatens us, then I beg you to bring my work onto your ship. Without it, my life is forfeit, and my knowledge worthless. Ino looked around the hydroponics lab, taking a mental inventory of everything in the room. Then she nodded. Azarin smiled, and Ino grabbed the personal communicator from her belt. Beninato, I need you to bring a crew up to the hydroponics lab on Deck 4. We need to move some very delicate scientific equipment.
Creeping in my sword's getting out of control. I gotta find my escape, get out of this black hole. Cause justice in the world is hard to find. Time has come, gotta make up my mind. No matter how deep or remote I hide, all my thoughts seem caught up inside. Creeps from the deep's gonna be freaking up your mind. Creeps from the deep's gonna